opportunity to share with you today some work that has been going on for the last 2 years in North Yorkshire. I think it's relevant because North Yorkshire is over 850 square kilometres, is unique in many ways. It's the largest non-metropolitan county. It's also the most sparsely populated. And another thing that is unique to us is almost a half, 47% of our land is protected, either national parks or areas of outstanding natural beauty. So what is the Royal Commission and why did it start? It was actually quite a bold move on behalf of North Yorkshire County Council, because they looked at this lovely place. It's got rich people, it's got poor people, it's got all the rest of it, but they were fed up with closing schools. They were looking at whether the transport and other offers were actually going to be right for the future. And they decided to step out of their comfort zone in the public sector and get 8 of us independently to look at North Yorkshire, to take input. We actually took input from over 70 people on how our county should go forward into the future. And these are some of the areas that we looked at. Forgive me, I cannot cover them all today, but I do want to try and cover those that I think are particularly appropriate for protected landscape. So the background, 2019, we're independent. And when you look at the sort of the jolly 8 of us that were in it, it actually gives you some idea about what they meant by independent. William Worsley is a landowner. Those of you will know he has the Hovingham estate, large, arable. He also does some amazing things, which I never knew before. Both he and his father have been building houses and renting them at below even the Joseph Rowntree cost for rent. Why? Because he doesn't want Hovingham to die, and he doesn't want Hovingham to become a retirement place. So his school is full, remember that. Dean John, the Dean of Ripon Cathedral, was our chair. Chris Clark is working with DEFRA, he's working with the National Trust now, a lot of places. This gentleman is one of the future thinkers about farming. Maximum sustainable output and the thermodynamics of farming is what he is doing, what DEFRA is looking at, and how they are going to look at how they support farming going into the future. It's all about working with nature, not working against nature. Now, Martin is one of the people that's managed to do really good stuff. In Hudswell, they saved their pub. They opened, as a community, a new shop, and then they also have built, so far, 5 and increasing affordable homes so that their village is sustainable. So, great community man. Heather Hancock, many of you will know from Yorkshire Forward. She was also on the DEFRA's food panel. She's now Master of St John's, Cambridge. Professor Sally Shorthall is the Duke of Northumberland Professor of Rural Economy at the University of Newcastle. She's worked in Ireland, in Scotland, in Wales, and she came to look at England in terms of rural economy. And she brought some amazing vision to it. Jean Macquarie has just retired as the editor-in-chief of many of the Yorkshire titles, so an expert journalist. And last, and I hope not least, there was a scientist and a businesswoman, myself. They told me they had picked me out because I guess I'm a private sector person. I've worked in the United States, run a large global electronic materials company, and therefore one of the things about business is that it's not about process, it's actually about delivery, because if you don't deliver to your customers, guess what? They don't buy from you and you go bust. So there's a pragmatism there in terms of what we need to do. We looked at several themes. Now, over the 2 years, these developed, in fairness, and you're getting a condensed view, so give me that. The overarching themes, which actually apply right across North Yorkshire, were digital connectivity that became even more apparent of its deficits during COVID, when school children maybe couldn't get their lessons because there just wasn't the broadband connectivity, people wanting to talk to their doctors over Zoom, maybe not there, etc, etc, etc. It just showed up the deficit. Demographic challenge, which I will talk about a little more. Energy transition. You may have heard that there is actually a climate crisis going on there, but one of the things you need to know about North Yorkshire is we are hooked on oil. Just think, if you live in North Yorkshire, especially in rural North Yorkshire, just go through your day. You get up, your house has probably been heated by oil, you get in your 4x4, which is probably driven by diesel, you might go to your farm where all your farm machinery is diesel. I'm not picking on Rydale, forgive me, it is just an example. An average resident of Rydale produces 9 tonnes of CO2 a year against the national average of 4. We have an issue transitioning away from our love of oil. And in the other major theme was the importance of communities in actually facing the future, taking their communities along with them, and those which are forward-looking, taking the fear out of those who actually like it as it is and don't really want it to change. There were major sub-themes: farming, land management, economy, rural transport, rural housing, schools, etc. In 2 years we covered quite a lot. What did we find? There are some really major blockers within our county which prevent the rural economy from thriving and present significant challenges. I'm going to talk more about demographic because I think it's one of the critical issues. We also have enormous opportunity. I mean, when I look at North Yorkshire and I compare it with a metropolitan area, when we're looking at things like climate change, when we're looking at opportunities in the economy, we have a massive opportunity not only to play our part, but to regenerate and build new businesses and new income streams. And we've talked about broadband. It is a human right. That is what we said to 10 Downing Street, and we fervently believe that, because if we want to do any of the other stuff, we are going to have full connectivity. This is probably, in my humble opinion, the most important slide I will show. Now, we were in the commission and we were tearing our hair out because people came with all their views, perfectly well-founded, wonderful views, on why their bit of it wasn't working as they wanted. And then we looked at the demographic. And then we realised what a core issue might be for North Yorkshire. This is the average demographic of the UK. Yes, there are quite a few people in the 50 to 70 region, but look at us. We have a missing cohort from 45 down. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means things simply like, well, we haven't got many people having babies, we haven't actually got many young people, so what a surprise, we're closing schools. It also says the economically active people are in that cohort as well. And we did a calculation, and there is 1.5 billion sterling of missing economic activity in North Yorkshire due to that skewed demographic. And the last, and I actually believe the most important, and this is controversial and I'm not going to apologise for it. If you look at who's kicking up a fuss about the future not looking great, who's protesting? You may or may not agree with the way they protest, I'm not taking issues on that, but they are protesting and they're saying they want change. Just a word to the wise, not so much from here, a hell of a lot from here. So our county is looking at going forward differently, building for the future, and one of the biggest cohorts that actually are going to demand that is missing. I think that's dangerous. We have a two-speed labour market, and this is really absolutely staggering when we looked at it. If you look at Rydale versus Harrogate, £140 a week difference, and we're talking about universal credit and £20 making a difference. This is the sort of This is the sort of deficit a rural economy has. And if you look at North Yorkshire, which has a lot of quite wealthy people in it, North Yorkshire compared with the national average, we're still below. Digital inequality, I'm not going to talk about much other than, if you're not with EE, then chances are you're doing a lot of this with your Vodafone phone. And the other thing we found is there are huge places with no broadband connectivity, even more places with only 3 megabits or something, which is great if only you want to be on Zoom, but if your kids want to be on Zoom at the same time as you're working from home, it ain't going to cut it. But I do believe that is now being taken seriously with things like Project Gigabit. This is where it starts really to get very serious. If we look at what DEFRA estimates, they estimate between 1/4 and 1/3 of farms will fail by 2035. Why? Well, about 170 million comes in off the old cap into North Yorkshire at the moment. Despite this, 80% of farms are already struggling to survive. 80% of farms are already struggling to survive. 2% are thriving. Now, why are they struggling? This is what the whole area that DEFRA is looking at, and this is the whole reason we need to look holistically again at how we do farming. Basically, if you have a wife involved or a partner involved in your farm, you are more likely to be profitable. Because 2 things, those B&Bs, those holiday lets, those supplementary income streams are actually supplementing farming to a great extent. And also Professor Sally Shorthall and Chris Clark's research shows that if you have a farming family rather than a farmer, they are more likely to be entrepreneurial, they are more likely to look at being prepared to look at different ways of farming, different behaviours and things like that, and are likely to be more profitable. Controversial, but irrefutable. So, the future of these protected landscapes, our enabling response to the climate crisis, and its the opportunities, if we grasp them. There is huge opportunity for renewable energy generation in our landscape. I mean, we have rivers for hydro, we have areas where wind and PV is there. I challenge the Church of England, every single one of their buildings faces east-west, meaning everyone has a south-facing roof. Please, why isn't every church covered in solar panels? They are in parts of the south of England where they actually export the excess to the local community. If you think, oh, electric cars, well, fine, but all those visitors that come up and love our national parks, they're going to charge their car to get here, and guess what? They're going to want to charge it again to get home or get round. So there's enormous opportunity for EV charging, both for residents, visitors, and when we looked at transport, and sorry I haven't got time to look at this, the rickety old diesel bus, we look forward 20, 30 years to community hubs of EV cars which are transport on demand. You dial them up when you need them. And when you go far enough forward, of course, the things drive themselves. We are going to need some planning easements to allow insulation of buildings. In the past, we've been able to put lovely oil underneath our buildings and heat them up, even if they leak like nothing on earth. Well, in future, that's not going to be possible. Do we really want quaint but cold? So there's a lot to look at how we're actually, which buildings we believe we must insulate, and we're going to have need to look at things that we've never had to look at before in terms of making those buildings livable. They're going to be, yes, after 2-3 years of head banging with National Grid and with Northern Power Grid. National Grid have just admitted, guess what, there's not enough electricity infrastructure in North Yorkshire to allow all those EV chargers, all those heat pumps, etc, etc. So they're now talking about the high level grid, the 300 kilovolts or whatever it is, the big stuff, which is going to have to be improved. Again, we're going to need it. How we put it through our protected landscapes, very important. There is a strategy for that. Enhanced biodiversity, I'm going to talk about more. Challenging non-sustainable processes, behaviours and cultures. This is hard. As a scientist, I know all the technology is not there yet, but I can see it coming. You know the thing that frightens me? The thing that frightens me is people throwing out the anchors saying we like it as it is. Not being prepared to embrace the future, which is going to be different. It is scary. I make no bones about it. But we have to do it. And actually, as Ian said, if we engage together and look at how we can do things, not that we can't or we won't, then we actually have a marvellous future with some of the opportunities here. And our communities are critical to this. If you take a community along with you, they will tell you what sort of heating they want. They will tell you if they want a district heating system. They will tell you, we can do these things with people if we embrace them. The protected landscape, new affordable housing. We have a deficit of 45,560 young people, right? They can't afford to live here. I mean, if you look at those employment figures, I mean, how the hell are you going to buy a house that's 300-400 grand in our protected landscape? You're not. We've changed the definition of affordable. The accepted definition is you take the market price, you lock 20% off it, and you say, there you go, it's affordable. No, it's not. Not when you're on those sorts of wages. Affordable should be defined as a multiple of local earnings. That's what makes a place affordable. We're going to need new business hubs. We've got to encourage people back here. We can't just rely on the people that are here reproducing a bit more. We've got 45,560 people missing, right? So we're going to have new business hubs. We're going to have business mentoring, so when people come here, they don't just all get on with it. They're actually put into a network. We're going to have to look at constraints on non-primary housing purchase. This is hard, but there was absolute unity amongst all those 8 people, and we come from very different backgrounds, on the fact if we continue allowing people to come in, buy a house, live there 8 weeks a year, we've got no chance of getting the 45,560 people back in. We looked at 2-stream education post-16 in our schools, because at the moment North Yorkshire has quite good schools, they're heavily academic. Guess what? We need electricians, we need plumbers, we need heating engineers, we need architects, we need vocational people that actually have the skills we need for the future. And to get those, we need to have a choice at 16 that says, you can do classics and go off to Oxford and run PPE, do PPE, or you can actually, I was going to say do something useful, forgive me, you can actually do something that is needed for the future. 20,000 new jobs in North Yorkshire in the energy transition alone. 20,000. Farming and land management transition. I am not an expert. I really am not an expert on this. I've had the privilege of sitting with people for 2 years who are. And I have listened with enormous and rapt attention of what they've been saying. And again, they are saying the way forward has great opportunities as well as challenges. If we look at the farming transition, the future is going to be work with nature rather than substituting for nature. In other words, no huge amounts of fertiliser to coax the ground into producing more stuff. It's going to have to be, how do we actually make it business viable And Business Viable is very interesting actually because, and again this work will be published soon, once you go over the maximum sustainable output of the piece of earth you've got, if you're just going for output and nothing else, and you're putting fertiliser on, etc., the amount of energy that you get from your crops or your beasts or something like that is far less than the amount of energy that you've put into the ground to get there. It's bonkers. And the only reason it's done is because at the moment that's how CAP works. It doesn't look at sustainable economics. What they're doing now is looking at sustainable economics. There will need to be critical mass enterprises. And I know that quite a lot of farmers are very, very proud, decent, family people operating their small farms. They're probably not critical mass, some of these. And there's going to have to be more entrepreneurial, more sharing, more working together in order to make these farms viable again. But there's huge opportunities. Now, okay, William was one of our commissioners, and obviously he's also the chairman of the Forestry Commission, so we did learn a lot about the right tree in the right place for the right reason. There's forestry, there's ecotourism, there's bioenergy, there are other opportunities. There's also superb opportunities for local provident, naturally grown produce. We've seen in our farmers' markets and things like that, there's huge, huge appetite, if you'll pardon the pun, for this sort of local stuff. And we need to rethink local abattoirs, and I know not everyone agrees with that. But if you've actually raised an animal with great care and delight, if it goes into an industrial abattoir, it comes out the other end and it's lost its provenance. So there's significant behaviour change. That's such a simple phrase to say there. Now how about land management transition? Again, there is no carving out areas that don't apply. We all have to change our behaviours. We all have to look at what we currently do to assess whether it's sustainable. And some of the work that the Commission has done, and the York and Humberside Climate Commission is doing the same, is we have to work with nature. And what we do has to be sustainable. It's not about conserving. Because if you've read how badly we are doing at conserving, and if you look at the level of biodiversity in our country, it's a shame. We ought to be ashamed. So enhanced biodiversity isn't about that species or that species. It's actually looking at an area and saying, what's missing? That's a far harder thing to do than say there's curlews or what have you. Actually saying, what should be here that isn't? There's new income streams. Again, major landowners have huge opportunities. There's electricity generation. And we all know just how desperately we are for increased generation. There's all those heat pumps, there's all those electric vehicles. A conservative view is that electricity demand is going to go up about 70%. I've actually seen evidence coming out of government and others and the LEP actually saying that because we're not on a gas grid here, hydrogen is not going to be available to everyone just to stick in their boilers as it might be in urban areas. And when you look at areas which are not quite as easy to do in terms of hydrogen, you're up at way past twice the level of electricity generation. So there's electricity generation, there's grid balancing. If you've got a large amount of land, then actually the grid is going to be very smart. There are going to be times when the wind is blowing very, very hard out there. We need to actually store the electricity to release it to the grid when everyone puts their kettle back on. There's environmentally built housing for rent. 45,560 people need to come back to North Yorkshire. They are going to need housing. Build environmental housing. William's done the maths. That's why he does it. He builds it. He makes again, below Joseph Rowntree, rents on it, and it still makes money. It can be done. Wildlife tourism. I mean, how many people have we met that come up to this wonderful landscape with their binoculars? They want to see stuff. So do we. Wellness and health tourism. Now that's an interesting one, isn't it? Health. I think we have immense opportunities for wellness and health tourism. Looking forward, a doctor will prescribe, go up to the North York Moors or the Yorkshire Dales or Exmoor, go up for a week, sort your head out, breathe the fresh air. Well, we have a dichotomy, because for 6.5 months of the year, in the North York Moors, you don't breathe fresh air. So we're going to have to make a decision. Are we going to clean up our air? Are we actually going to put out, please come to the North York Moors, the Yorkshire Dales, Exmoor, and actually say this is a healthy place to be? All that tells you, and this again, very, very simple sentence, there are going to have to be significant changes to current practices. That missing generation of 45s down would be challenging these hard. So, that's very much a capsule of what we've been doing over the last 2 years. We called our vision, or we had our vision, for North Yorkshire as beautiful, connected, digitally, networked with community hubs for transport, etc., etc. But it's looking to the future, not sitting, glorying in the past. That way, all those opportunities come to fruition. If we look backwards, others are going to do it before us. We've now finished our work. We have published. There is an eco-friendly way of getting this, which is on the northyork.gov.uk website, and I've only scratched the surface in what we've done. We've looked at education, various things like that. So thank you very much indeed for your patience in listening to it. It's been a delight to share it with you. Go forward, look at the future, make our place somewhere that 45,560 people want to come and live.